But I want to talk a little bit about what is going on in this country in terms of not just the history of the Black Panther Party, but I'm sure most of you know very little about the Black Panther Party other than that it could be like the opposite number of the Ku Klux Klan or some kind of black terrorist organization or whatever. You know, it's like Martin Luther King's dream. He had a dream. We don't know what it was. Something about children walking up a mountain holding hands. We don't know what the hell Martin Luther King's dream was. We barely remember that he had a dream. We just know he was nonviolent. That's the main thing that we think about when we think about Dr. King, and we always want to put that forward. But I think the real question is, what kind of a society are we living in, and what kind of society do we want? This evening at dinner, most of us were talking a lot about health care in America because, you know, there's a notion that we should all have health care insurance when the real issue is we should all have health care as opposed to insurance, because I'm not that worried about insurance as I am about living and dying and so forth. And then some people will tell you, well, you know, I don't know, some people probably saw the Michael Moore film Sicko, which I didn't see, but I lived in France, so I can tell you that there was health care available to every single person for free, basically, or for a very minimal amount. And then people say, well, isn't that socialized medicine, as though that's a meaningful term. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. The bottom line is when you're dying and you have breast cancer or prostate cancer, or you, as poor Mo's nephew tonight almost lost his arm in a terrible construction accident, you're not worrying about whether it's socialized medicine, insurance, anything else. You want somebody to hurry up and come to you and give you some assistance right now. You are not looking for an entertainer or a basketball player or a rapper or anybody else. You need a doctor, and you need one now. And if you don't have the money, your life is in danger. And so in France, one of the countries in the world that most of the Western European countries, though, do have free, what is effectively free health care, because the people made a decision they'd rather spend their $10 billion a month not on a war in Iraq, but perhaps on health care and education for the people ourselves. So the question becomes, what kind of a society do we want, and how does that relate to race in America today, and so forth. And that's what I want to talk about. You know, Jean-Paul Sartre, and I know some of you are studying, is there philosophy courses anymore? I don't even know. Sort of cut that out of the, let's not do any real thinking, you know. Let's just learn some stuff to be on track to get a job, you know. And we don't have to know anything that doesn't go to the job question, you know. We don't even have to know anything about our own history or anything else. But Jean-Paul Sartre, who was a French philosopher in the 20th century, effectively, said, hell is a place where by design nobody gets his needs met. That's a heavy statement, isn't it? In other words, if you really think you're in hell, hell would be that place where when you want some food, you can't get it. When you want some water, you don't have it. When you need a place to live, or you need the things that you need as a human being are denied to you by design. In other words, it's never going to happen. You can't even work your way out of it. You can't do the right thing and all of that. So that by design, in the scheme of things, hell is a place where, by design, nobody gets his needs met. I think that we want a place where, by design, everybody gets his or her needs met. And so the question is, how can we? I don't think anybody wants to walk around and say, well, this is a country in which so many people go to bed hungry or really just die of malnutrition or disease or anything else because of money, because we don't have the money to pay for it. And we tend to think that we need money and that what's wrong with that? You know, it's like, why do these people that, you know, they're lazy, they're not working, they, you know, so forth and so on. But as soon as you get into an accident and can't work, or as soon as you find yourself unable to work or what have you, then you begin to understand the relationship, and you sort of become an enlightened person and realize that my interest is connected to your interests, because if something should happen to me and I should be denied and find myself in that position, I want to create the conditions or the design for everyone to get his or her needs met. Now, today in the United States, we have the highest incarceration rate in the world, right? In the world. This is an incredible concept when you think about it, because this is a country that's talking about Iran and, you know, countries like Darfur. We're crying and carrying on about all these places in the world and how barbaric these other people are, you know. I remember when Timothy McVeigh was ultimately caught in connection with that Oklahoma federal building bombing. But before he was caught, a bunch of people were walking around talking about, you know, I think it was some Arabs that did this. You know, it's like they looked like some black Muslims. I mean, really, these were reports that were coming out of Oklahoma City at the time. Nobody thought it was going to be little Opie going bad, you know. So here comes this little red-headed all-American guy who has blown up the building. But the point is that there was a notion that it had to be somebody, some foreigner or something, because we had this kind of other attitude. But so we're in a country where we're criticizing all these other countries around the world. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world. And of those over 2 million people in prison in America today, 50% are black. 50% are black. And so, and black people represent only 13% of the American population. So there's a big disparity between our numbers, our ratio of blacks in prison and the ratio of blacks in the country. So the question becomes, why? And people go, I remember a guy, district attorney of the county of DeKalb County in Georgia, where I live. I don't live in DeKalb County, I live in Georgia, who said that one of the reasons why most of the people that he prosecuted as young children being prosecuted as adults were black boys is because they were the only ones committing crimes, and really felt that that made sense to him. And so then people start asking questions like, well, why is that true that black people are in prison? I mean, they're out there committing all these crimes. And so there's no analysis. And so we start going off into, well, let's stop all the black on black crime, and let's just stop the black criminals and the gangsters and all of this stuff, as though this has any reflection of any reality. And it has no reflection. The biggest amount of crime is actually committed by white people against white people. It's just the bottom line. A lot of white people in America, so it's a lot of white on white crime, right? If we want to call it that. There's there's hardly anybody thinks in terms of white on black crime, and black on black crime has become this new thing, and black on white crime is the death penalty, so we know what's happening with crime. But we never even think to ourselves, well, crime is really a political question. We think crime is a moral question. We think of it as, if you kill somebody, you go into the joint. That's who's in the prison right now, people who kill people. But you can kill somebody with impunity in this country, of course. Somebody comes into your house, looks like they want to steal some of your clothing or your items, or looks like they might want to harm you in some way, you can blow him away right there. Matter of fact, if you blow him away at the door, you can just, as long as that foot was in the door, or a hand was in the window, you're walking away. Self-defense is a complete defense under the laws of the United States, am I right? So, you can kill. So murder is not a crime, it's only a crime sometimes. So if your name is Colin Powell and George Bush I tells you to go to Panama and arrest Noriega, remember that one? The drug dealer who also went to the School of Americas in Georgia and was trained by the CIA. If he tells you to go to Panama and you do what Colin Powell did, said arrest Noriega, he says, okay. He put all these troops on the ground, helicopters coming in, Black Hawks landed off in Panama. We weren't at war with Panama. We were trying to arrest, quote unquote, Noriega, who everybody knew was dealing drugs for a long, long time before the day that he was arrested, so-called arrested. And in the process of arresting Noriega, who ended up in the Catholic Church, and so Colin Powell didn't want to bomb the Catholic Church. Had it been a mosque, we might have found out something different, but it was a church. He said, I'm not going to bomb the church now. So Noriega came out with a little white flag, and he said, look, don't you see these pictures of me and Bush? We're here. And he had pictures. They showed it at trial. I mean, this is not like the Black Panther conspiracy myth from the 60s. This is these are real photographs, Bush. And so Noriega gets arrested. But in the process of arresting Noriega, over 5,000 Panamanian people get killed by American troops. We don't even know about these people. They're just some Panamanians sitting in Panama City in Panama. We don't even remember them. Nobody says Colin Powell is a mass murderer. Nobody says he's got blood on his hands. That's illegal. We think that's all right. Matter of fact, we're really not even thinking about it. I don't know anybody in a joint anywhere who has killed 5,000 people. But he's not a mass murderer. He's just a good guy that went in there and got Noriega. And when asked about, don't you feel you used excessive force, Colin? General Powell, don't you feel like killing 5,000 people was a bit much to arrest one guy? He said, I don't deal with numbers, I deal with results. And now he's talking about volunteer America. So we see Colin Powell on the cover of Ebony magazine, and we see that he's a hero. He's not a murderer, even though all these people died. And they were not our enemies. They had not even charged with having weapons of mass destruction. But they're dead as sure as we're sitting here. So we have to first understand that how did it come to be that we misunderstood the whole concept of crime? So we think all these people sitting in the joint are criminals. So naturally, we're satisfied that 50% of the people in prison are black because they must be committing crimes. But we don't even know what crime is. So this is what this is about, to talk a little bit about this. I want to say this because I did write a book called The Condemnation of Little B, and so I want to use the Little B story as exemplary of what I'm talking about when I talk about the concept of what I call New Age racism, which is that we're happy, we as a society, I don't just mean white people, I mean black people. You know, Henry Louis Gates, who is a head of African American Studies, whatever it's called now at Harvard University, says that there are two nations of black America. There are the good black Americans, like the Cosby, you know, like Cosby talks about how Shaniqua and Chantrene and them, they don't like those people from the hood, you know. And Cosby's the good black father, and then there's the rest of them, you know, the people that wear the, you know, that sag and do rap songs and, you know, sell cocaine and, you know, the gangbangers and that kind of thing. Those are not, they're not really part of that other black America, and they need to, something needs to happen to them. So there's this notion that there must be something wrong with these are the bad people that need to go to prison, and that's how we ended up with this number of people in prison. So I want to talk a little bit about this boy, Little B. Little B was born in 1983, and he was, by the time he was 8 years old, in Atlanta, Georgia, in an area called the Bluff. And by the time he was 8 years old, his house was the crack house. So that means that all that went on in that house was crack selling, crack use, and that's it. And as he told me, his mother smoked up the crack, smoked up the water, smoked up the electricity. In other words, everything got turned off so that all money could be diverted to the use of crack. And we like to talk about these kind of dysfunctional black families and say, well, look at this woman, she's out here selling her body or whatever she's doing to getting welfare to buy crack, which she was doing, absolutely all of that. And as a matter of fact, I like to remind people that when Little B, at this moment, probably doesn't know anybody that he grew up with that ever had a job. Can you imagine just like having no relationship to anything in the country except for everybody in his neighborhood is either selling or using dope? And it was the kind of neighborhood where, you know, when people say, well, you know, the problem with black people today is, and the reason you have such bad health problems is that you're just not eating enough fruits and vegetables. You cannot be a vegan in the Bluff, okay? Because you will die. You can go to the corner store and you can buy some potato chips, and you can buy some yak hair in a package that you can weave into your hair, you know. And you can buy some weed, and you can buy a beeper and a phone card, but you cannot, and maybe some bad milk for 4 times the price of everything else, but you cannot buy any tomatoes or lettuce or anything. There's no Whole Foods in the hood, in other words. And even if there were, nobody could afford it. That's why people go to Popeye's Chicken and their children grow up learning that they want to know McDonald's combo 1, 2, or 3 and don't know anything about real food or anything else. So that's the neighborhood that Little B grew up in. There's no movie theaters there. There's no library there. There's no park that's safe except for because everybody in the park is shooting up, smoking up, or whatever else. It's just a rough situation. And so when Little B grew up, by the time he was 11, his mother was declared unfit. Well, he was declared a deprived child. And as a deprived child, he was taken from the mother's home. Not that she actually had a home, but he was taken from whatever it was. And he was going to school every day up until that point because he and his sister went to get that free breakfast and lunch, you know, at school. You know, when people who are teachers sometimes say to me, well, you know, these kids don't even want to listen in class. Now, you are living in the crack house. You get up every morning from somewhere in a corner, and it's 12 people laying around high. You got to walk over there, and there's no water in your house. You got to go up the street to do all these kind of, and you want me to do my math homework. You were telling me I should be more responsible, and my parents aren't taking care of me, and all this sort of thing. So when I met Little B, so by the time he was 11, he was put into a group home. And in the group home, it was horrible, so he ran away and ran back to what he knew, which was in the Bluff. And what he knew was all that he could do to survive was sell dope for his brother. His brother was like 17, 18 years old. Brother been selling dope for a long time, so he started selling dope so he could have enough money to eat. I asked him one time, I said, so what did you do for dinner? And even that was a middle-class question. The notion of dinner wasn't even in his frame of thinking. Like, I get enough money to eat today, and that's, you know, what I do, and I go and I buy food. And so he lived for the next 2 years on the street by himself, hustling here, hustling there. And I said, Michael, his name is Michael Lewis. I said, Michael, you were homeless. he said, no, I was never homeless. I always had somebody's house I could go to and sleep. And so in his mind, he was just wandering the streets, never went back to school. He was arrested at 13 years old for a murder that he, first of all, it's not really important, but I just think I should say that he didn't commit this murder. It was a dope killing. Guy rolled up to the store, got blown away because he owed the dope man. If you owe the dope man and you go to the dope man's house, you better have some money on you. Life is cheap on the range, You can get killed if you owe somebody some money for some dope because they have to make a point to everybody else that might owe them some money. But that wasn't Michael. He didn't do that. But other people that knew him did. And so they set him up as a kid thinking that he wouldn't get any time. And he was so naive and young and so beholden to all the dope boys in the neighborhood who were older, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. And they put him in the joint and he ended up getting convicted of this murder. I went to see about him because this was such an incredible case to see this little boy's face, this 13-year-old child. He was so little. And the whole of Atlanta, they call Atlanta Black Mecca. It's not really, they call it Black Mecca because the idea is like Mecca, but it's like Black Mecca. And it's sort of some place where it's a wonderful place for black people. I mean, it's ludicrous to call it that because it has nothing to do with any promised land or anything else for blacks. But the blacks who were in Atlanta, who were a part of the hierarchy, that other nation of Black America, they condemned Little B right away when he was arrested. This is a bad boy. This is exactly the problem in the black community today. All these bad boys and gangsters running around here killing each other, and he killed a good father. They didn't mention that the good father's up there owing the dope man, but that's another story. So he said he killed a good father and killed him in front of his kids. And this is what's wrong with black people today. All these bad boys growing up in this neighborhood and hurting our people. Like, otherwise we would be living on streets of paved with gold, but for these bad black boys, you see. Now, around the same time, there was a kid in Eugene, Oregon, a white kid named Kip Kinkle. And Kip Kinkle got up one morning in Eugene, Oregon, just outside of Eugene, Oregon, and killed mom and dad, okay? And stuffed them underneath the house and wired the house with some explosives. I don't know where Kip got all these skills from, but nevertheless, he did it. And this is not a question. This is not like, oh, he didn't do it. He did all of this. And then he went off to school with a backpack. You probably know the drill. Had the guns in the backpack, had an assault rifle in his hand, arrives at school, shot up 25 people before they took him down. Kip was a little kid, too. So it was kind of surprising it took that long to take Kip down. But by the time, 3 of those people died. So that day he killed 5 people and wounded the rest, 20-some other people. And everybody was like, oh, my God, this is horrible. This is so horrible. And the next day at the school, at the middle school, there was a big banner out in front of the school. And it sort of represented what people were thinking around America at the time, because I guess it was after Columbine. I can't remember when Columbine was anymore, but it was, I think maybe it was before Columbine. But anyway, when was Columbine? 2000, 2001?
April 20th, 1998.
98, before Columbine. So you had a bunch, thank you. You had a bunch of people. This is the beginning of those little incidents. And so Kip was there, and everybody had a big banner out, and it said, why, Kip? Which I think is just, I love that saying. Why, Kip? I mean, first of all, the kid is in trouble if your parents are naming you Kip, knowing your last name is Kinkle. You know what I mean? and his sister's name was Chris. And they were all with K's. But anyway, mom and dad are dead. 2 other people are dead. Everybody's dead. And they asked why. And people began to write articles about Kip. Well, what was it? Was he lonely in ex-Serbia? Isolated, looking at too many violent videos? What was the problem of Kip's teen angst? Nobody called Kip a thug. Nobody said, this is the problem with America, bad boys like Kip Kinkle. He was a good kid who just did a bad thing. My boy's charged with killing 1 person, not 5. And he was a thug, and he's the whole black America's problem. This is the reason that this country's falling apart. These thug boys running around here committing all these crimes, going to prison in these incredible numbers. But Kip Kinkle, now I'm not trying to say Kip is a thug and my boy is. I'm trying to say that we never even saw Kip as a criminal, much less a thug. He was just a kid who was misunderstood. Same as the Columbine boys. They were good boys. They were alienated. The black and the other kids, the jocks, and it was an alienation question. It was never a thug or a criminal question. And we don't want to treat these boys the same as we want to treat these bad little B's in life. Now, you know, most of the people sitting in this room really know and feel that Kip Kinkle probably was a good kid who did a bad thing and that little B was a thug. And it's that pervasive attitude in this country that has created a culture of racism that we no longer even identify anymore. We're so satisfied with it. We think it's all okay.